So here we have to share his predictions about what the technological revolution means for the industry in coming years, Neil Mohan. Neil is the Vice President for Display Advertising at Google. He's responsible for Google's suite of display advertising products. Prior to Google, he was the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Product Development at DoubleClick. Building the company's strategic plan, he led the product management team in its execution, and he was in charge of the growth of the business. So please join me in welcoming to the IAB stage from Google, Neil Mohan.
Everybody. Thanks a lot, Randy, for that introduction. You know, it's a pleasure to be back here speaking with all of you again. I find this event sort of one of the most advanced in terms of thought leadership and really prescient in terms of talking about what the next phase of our industry is going to be all about. And as Randall mentioned, today, what I'm going to be talking about is what the next phase of the display advertising revolution is going to be focused on. And I'm really excited to be talking about that because I think it's going to be the most exciting phase yet. I think we would all agree that we've been through an incredible few years in the display industry as it's frankly witnessed a rebirth from the early days of the internet. But before I actually move on to the next phase, what I thought I would do is take stock of where we are as an industry overall. You know, as we've all read about over the course of the last few weeks, we've hit a really important milestone where online advertising has now become the second largest advertising medium, second only to TV. That's incredible, especially for those of us who've been in this industry for a very long period of time. But what's an even more exciting fact there is that within online advertising, display specifically, which represents something about 40% of that industry, is growing the fastest at over 25% year on year. You know, if you think back to just a couple of years ago, that type of growth would have been simply phenomenal, and that's what's happening today. But enough of the sort of patting ourselves on the back. Let's take a quick view at how we actually got here. So it's not going to come as a surprise to those of you in the room that a speaker from Google is going to say that technology played a really big role in that. But I believe that to be the case. I think through the collective efforts of all the technology that's represented by all of us in this room, you know, we've transformed how the buying and selling of display advertising has worked. Everything from targeting to optimization to measurement to formats has all changed. And the collective efforts of everybody here has, I would submit, created the most advanced advertising system in human history. You know, if you think about it, we deliver billions of tailored, customized ads across millions of web pages using hundreds and hundreds of different signals every single day, impression by impression. And this is creating tremendous results for all of us as advertisers, publishers, agencies. You know, some of you may have seen some recent studies that Google did where we tracked all of the publishers that participate, for example, in Google's DoubleClick ad exchange. And we found that on average, they saw a lift of 188% in revenue by participating in the new technology that's come into fruition in the last couple of years. That's 3 times improvement in revenue for our publishers. And our advertisers and agencies are seeing great results as well. Some of our case studies have shown that through things like data-driven, real-time buying, click-through rates have improved 135%. Conversion rates have gone up 150%. And most importantly, cost per action is down 145%. And this is really still the early days, but all of these results bode extremely well for the industry. And there's a huge opportunity. But there's one problem. Let me show that to you. So I think many of you in the room will remember the Ad Age 2011 audience buying guide. Many of the companies represented in this room were featured there. It had about 25 companies, everything from Adnetic to X+1 across the alphabet, included Google. What we did was we took that magazine and we ran the marketing blurbs for all of those products, all of those companies through an algorithm and created this word cloud that you see here. Now, the marketing departments of all these companies aren't stupid. They're speaking exactly the language that they knew their customers were interested in, their publishers, their advertisers, and their agencies. And it was a conversation, as you can see here, that focused on things like inventory, reach, precision, efficiency, data. These are all great things, and we're all saying the same thing in the industry, and we're all professing to be able to do some subset of these or all of these. But I would submit to you this morning that there's one thing that's critically important that's missing, one word. Users. Think about it. Advertising has always been about connecting with users, and where do you see it on this chart? Well, actually, if you look really, really closely, you can see it in the top left-hand corner. You need something like a magnifying glass or something to actually see it, but it's actually there. I find this to be incredibly significant. Users, I think we would all agree, need to be front and center, because otherwise we're frankly not doing our jobs, because we're not making those connections, those emotional bonds with the people that are actually seeing these advertisements. A lot of the great innovation over the last few years has been focused on making our lives easier, more efficient, more effective, etc. And that's great, but as a result, I feel that sometimes users have just been an afterthought. We did a survey recently, a YouGov survey of more than 1,000 online Americans, where we asked them what their favorite ad formats were. And when we got the results back, they were pretty surprising. We found that display advertising was slightly behind other advertising formats like glossy magazine ads, skywriting from airplanes, or ads in movie theaters, all formats that have been around for over 50 years. Think about that. The only format that has sight, sound, motion, and interactivity was behind all of those formats. That's not the way it should be, and all of us who've been in the industry for a while know through its history that when we actually do focus on users and making that connection, really, really profound things can happen. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Think about all the ads that we grew up with, or those ads that have really stuck with us over the course of the years. Here's just a few examples of them. Everybody remembers Volkswagen's Think Small, or of course Nike's sort of iconic Just Do It ads. The Pepsi generation, or Where's the Beef from Wendy's in the 1980s. Now, if we all went home today and asked our spouses or our friends what recent display advertising campaigns have made such an impact on them, what type of answers do you think you'd get back? Now, of course, there have been great display campaigns that have been created, but what answers do you really think we would get? What I'm going to say is that I think it's imperative that we improve the efficacy of these ads in terms of making an emotional connection with users, making them user-focused, making them a lot more relevant, interactive, and truly engaging for users. And as I said, I think it's a necessity, not something that's a nice to have. And the reason for that is fundamentally that with the new technology, advertising, the viewing of ads by users is actually becoming optional. Let's talk about what I mean by that. The first is there's a proliferation of media choices. We all know this. 30 years ago, you bought a 30-second ad at 8 p.m. on the 3 primetime networks, you got 80% of Americans. Today, that's simply not the case. There's 250 million websites, just 1 million channels on YouTube alone. So if users aren't interested in your ads, they can just basically switch the channel. Now, second is the proliferation of screens. We just recently did a survey where we found that 73% of all online video viewers also had a second companion screen, usually a smartphone, up and running at the same time. Again, if they don't like your ads, they can just switch screens. The third is simply the ability to avoid ads. In this survey that I alluded to, this YouGov survey, we found that up to 36% of all those people that were surveyed used some means, either subscriptions or ad blockers or what have you, to avoid ads, and that technology is only going to proliferate. And finally, there's this notion through technology again of ads as content, where through things like social media and search, users can actually find the ads that they're really interested in and watch those instead of yours if they're not interested in yours. So making ads that are truly better and engaging for users is an imperative for all of us. And remember when I say that, it's not just about bigger ads, it's about better ads. And that's where the innovation needs to be. The good news, of course, is that if we do this, I think our users are telling us that they would be a lot more interested in this type of advertising. As part of this consumer research, we found that about 18% of those people surveyed said that display ads are either useful or very useful. But in the same breath, they also said they gave us very clear indication of those types of things that they would like to see within display ads that would make them much more useful. Things like much more relevancy. So fewer ads, but maybe more relevant. Much more interactivity, engaging formats like video, richer formats, offers and deals, things that really apply to their interests. And what's really amazing is what they said after that, which was that if we did all of these things as an industry, a whopping 66% of those users would rate display advertising as either useful or very useful. 2/3 of every user is saying that about an ad. No other advertising medium would have even come close. So the opportunity for us to actually be much more user-centric is a really profound one, and it's something that I think we need to embrace. You know, those of you who have heard me talk in the past have probably heard me talk about a couple of phases of this display revolution. The first, of course, was the building block, which is this notion of a media revolution. The fact that, especially with the proliferation of devices like tablets and smartphones and things like that, more and more and more media consumption is happening online or happening digitally. And that's only going to continue to accelerate as other parts of the world adopt these new technologies. The second phase, which we've all talked a lot about, is this technology revolution, which has dramatically improved all of our lives in terms of performance, efficiency, higher revenues, etc. And as I said, though, there needs to be this next phase of the revolution, this third phase, which I think is going to be the most exciting, and I'm just going to call it the user revolution. We need to bring along the users as an industry. That's where I predict a lot of our efforts are going to focus. That's certainly, I know, where a lot of our efforts within Google are focused these days. And I think that if we do this as an industry, it'll have a profound impact on it. Now, it's the early days of this third phase of the display revolution. And what I thought I would do is make 6 predictions about how I think the display advertising landscape is going to change as a result of this much more user-centric approach to how we view advertising online. The first, which may come across as a little surprising, is that I actually think, as if we succeed in terms of this next phase of the revolution, online impressions per user, so the number of ads that we all see every single day, will actually decrease, not increase. You know, if you think about it, sometimes more is just more. You know, the internet is sometimes a very cluttered, chaotic space, millions and millions of websites, literally trillions of display ads delivered, served up every single year. And with all this noise, it comes as no surprise that users have a hard time engaging with those ads that are truly relevant and meaningful to them. And amongst all of this banner blindness, it's surprising to me that we keep alluding to impressions, for example, as a means to measure the success of this industry. And we've seen some of this, this paradox of proliferation of choices in the offline world as well. A few years ago in 2000, Columbia University ran this study where they found that when consumers were given a wider variety of choices, they actually purchased less. What they did was they used the grocery store as a setting, and they gave half the users a choice between 6 jars of jelly, and the other half a choice among 24 jars of jelly. And what they found was really surprising, which is that while the group that saw 24 jars of jelly were perhaps initially more interested, 60% relative to 40% in the other case, they ended up purchasing jelly dramatically less. Only 3% of those users actually purchased a jar, compared to 30% who were only given 6 choices. And I think the same thing could apply online. What if instead of seeing, on average, the 100 or so display ads we see every day, we only saw 75? But those were much, much more relevant, personalized, customized to your interests, and were much more interactive, engaging, and actually made that emotional connection through things like creativity at scale. Wouldn't that be a better user experience? And we've seen that as evidence. You take search as example. In search, if the ads don't hit a certain relevancy threshold, as we all know, then it's better actually to not show an ad. That's better from a user value proposition standpoint, and it actually performs better for the advertisers that their ads are only shown when they're truly, truly relevant. And I would submit that if publishers adopt this, we have evidence to see that they could actually generate more revenue as well. Instead of slapping up a bunch of ads on their web pages, if they were thoughtful about them, had fewer ads, but ads that were much more matched to the context or the audience they've aggregated, we've seen evidence that they would actually generate more revenue. And of course, these formats should be customized for the particular context. We found, for example, that text ads work very well in things like email. A 30-second unskippable pre-roll doesn't work that well in short-form video. Graphical rich media ads work extremely well on a number of types of websites. So the format, of course, is important. But the transformation that I'm fundamentally talking about, it goes something like this. The very common experience of all of us today is that when we go to a page, we'll see something like, let's say 4 ads, probably from 4 different advertisers, an auto manufacturer, a travel site, retail, bank, what have you, and matched loosely on some context or something about the user. The future that I envisage, though, is one where users have voluntarily contributed a whole lot more information to make that advertising dramatically more personalized and customized, so that we can serve up the types of offers and the types of propositions that they are really looking for, and combine them with rich media formats, video, or other forms of interactivity to make it truly, truly engaging at great scale. So in this scenario, instead of those 4 ads I talked about, maybe the user only sees 2 on a page, but they're much, much more engaging. And as a result, the user value proposition is dramatically more. And of course, that translates into better performance for the advertisers and higher revenue for the publishers. I think this change towards fewer ads is inevitable. And I think it's going to be a profoundly great thing for our industry. And I'm really excited about developing the technology to move us in that direction. Of course, as the ads become more relevant, we should see engagement go up dramatically as well. As there's less clutter, more personalization, the engagement rate should dramatically increase. I think all of you have probably seen the most recent DoubleClick industry benchmarks. There was, you saw the usual studies in there, click-through rates of something like 0.09%, rich media a little bit better, around 1%. Interaction rates somewhere around 2.3%, and interaction time sometimes around 9 seconds. That's interesting, but what's more interesting to me is that those numbers haven't really dramatically changed over the course of the last 3 years. What I'm predicting, though, is that through this next phase of innovation, those engagement rates across all ad formats are going to increase by 50% across the board. Not just for certain types of rich ads, not just at certain times or in certain circumstances, but across all display ads, everywhere, all the time. We all know that relevant, more attractive ads perform better. Google, as you all know, acquired a technology called Terracent, which customizes ads based on the user's interests, the website they're on, their demographics. their location, what language they speak, even what the weather is outside. And the results are pretty impactful. Things on the order of 2 times increase in click-through rates, 2.5 times increase in ROI for the advertisers. But what's important is that it's not just about customizing the ads, it's actually tailoring the ad formats themselves to the devices through which that content is being delivered. And I think mobile advertising is the best example of this. Mobile phones, as we've all said before, they're like little supercomputers that you carry around in your pocket, and they can do incredible things. Imagine you're sitting on a subway, or you're just walking down the street, and you see a billboard for a product that you're interested in. Well, now you can just hold up your phone, capture a picture of that product, and instantaneously get a lot more information about it. Maybe it's an interactive game. Maybe it's a video about that product. Or maybe simply it's a map that can show you which store to buy it at on your way home from work that day. And users are engaging in these types of ads in droves because they're fun, they're informative, they deliver real value. And rich media ads in general on mobile devices are growing extremely fast as well. In fact, over half of the top 50 brand advertisers that work with us on our AdMob network use these types of ads. As an example, Volvo's S60, when they launched that car, the ad unit that ran was one where users could see a 360-degree view of the car that Volvo was advertising. Now that's really interesting, and the click-through and interaction rates for these ads were through the roof, which is great, of course, in terms of performance. But what I found to be the most sort of insightful nugget in there is that when users clicked and interacted, they did that for, on average, for about a minute. Compare that to the 9 seconds that I said before for traditional display ads, and you can see the amount of opportunity that exists in terms of increasing the interactivity and engagement that we get out of users. Tablets are another great area of innovation, not simply because traffic on tablets is going through the roof. We've seen something on the order of a 300% improvement or growth in traffic on our AdMob network that's coming from tablet devices. So it's not just about traffic, though. Users love these larger devices, the high fidelity screens, the ability to kind of touch, tap, and swipe and interact. And if you think about it, a tablet that you're holding on your lap is, from a perspective standpoint, is the equivalent of you watching an 80-inch TV screen in your family room. So it's no wonder that the amount of ad interactivity that you can get and engagement you can get on those formats, those tablet formats, is tremendous. We're making a big investment there. I know lots of people in this room are, and some of you may have seen just a couple of weeks ago we launched a number of formats that were specific to tablet devices that took advantage of this high resolution, and the results have been pretty great. Let me show you a couple examples of what I mean, and both of these are formats that I'm extremely excited about, but I think they're just the beginning. So, that was an interesting ad, and obviously there was lots of calls to action in there in which the users engaged. But I don't know if you noticed that at the top left-hand, upper left-hand corner of the ad, there was a little button that said replay. And what we found is that over 50% of the users that saw this ad clicked that button. They clicked it over and over because they wanted to see Thor using the hammer to break through their tablet screens. Users find these formats incredibly fun, engaging, and they make a meaningful impact in terms of the brand, in terms of the product on their experience, and it's something that they will actually remember and talk about the next day, just because by virtue of the way that they're interacting with the ads. The next example that I'm going to show you is one that I think is even more interesting because it actually combines the power of desktop display with mobile and tablet devices. So as you saw here, not only did the application recognize the advertising that was running on the desktop, it was able to capture an image of that particular product and overlay it on top of a background of a race course. And of course, you could have done that with a smartphone, with a tablet, or what have you. Users love these formats. They're fun, they're engaging, they're creative, and I think we're going to see more and more and more of these, which is extremely exciting. And these are just really, frankly, the tip of the iceberg. If we're having this conversation in a year, I would imagine hundreds of these types of examples. The next thing I wanted to talk about, which is related to some of the comments I made before, is a prediction about control. And what I'm saying here is that for a full 25% of all display ads that are delivered, the users will directly have a say in why those ads were being delivered to them. And I think this is important because users are expressing the desire to have more control over these ads, either in terms of skipping or not skipping the ad formats, in terms of updating their ads preferences so that the ads are better customized to their interests, or even signing up for different types of display ads like offers and deals. We all know what the promise of video is in terms of sight, sound, and motion. What we have learned over the course of the last few months is that when users choose to watch a video ad, it's a lot more valuable for the advertiser than when they're forced to watch it. On YouTube, a few months ago, we launched a format called TrueView. And the idea here is that within a couple of seconds of that video ad playing, a little button pops up, and the user can skip the ad entirely if it's something that they're not interested in. Now, of course, when we ran these formats, impressions went down a lot because lots of users skipped the ad. But also, lots of users watched the ad. And those users that watched the ad were incredibly more valuable for those advertisers. And as a result, the advertisers, of course, were willing to pay more because those users were, through an affirmative action, essentially saying that I'm interested in your brand, I'm interested in your product, and I want to engage in it. And the performance has been so strong that a full 30% of all the video pre-roll ads that run on YouTube are not standard pre-rolls, but are of this TrueView format, and I expect that number to grow dramatically in the months and quarters ahead. I mentioned this notion of selecting preferences. A couple years ago, we launched a product called Ads Preferences Manager, which, with the click of a button, users can go to and choose the types of things that they're interested in, customize them. So if you're interested in adventure travel, you can indicate that. If you're interested in NBA basketball, you can indicate that, and the ads will be tailored based on that interest. And what we found as a result of that is that when users went to the Ads Preferences Manager, whatever their original intention was, for every one user that opted out of these interest-based types of ads, a full 7 didn't opt out but actually customized their interests so that the advertising that they actually got was much, much more catered to what their actual interests were. And I think that's a really powerful signal that all of the consumers are sending us in terms of the relevancy that they would like to see. And I think that's, and it's great to give them that control. And I think that's going to be a very common feature of all display ads in the next 5 years. The next piece that I want to talk about is something that we all come back to, which is measurement. And the point here is we've all talked about getting beyond the click, getting beyond the impression. But I think that if we're going to have a much more user-centric approach to our advertising efforts, the metrics need to change in a profound way as well. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of these. We've talked a lot about how users engage emotionally with ads. Well, we need to actually find a way of really measuring this. And at Google, we're focused on this very aggressively, and I know that a lot of other companies are as well. Just to give you an example of a project that we just ran, we used some special biometric technology to measure things like hover rates, eye tracking, et cetera, to measure the emotional engagement of a user as an ad played out. And this happened to be a video ad that was running in a banner. And we were able to determine precisely where in that ad the emotional connection was the strongest. And as a result of that, the insights that were given back to the advertisers were truly profound. Now, of course, this was a one-off, and it's not something that's common in any of our campaigns that we run today. But imagine if we could actually do this at scale and deliver this as a means to measure the efficacy of all of our campaigns. And imagine if we could tie it to things like likelihood to purchase. You know, we recently did a study where we found that a well-executed display campaign can increase the likelihood to purchase by 24%, and a rich media interactive campaign can increase it by 34%. Imagine if that wasn't just a one-off case study, but if we could actually measure that on every single campaign that we ran. So that emotional engagement, being able to measure that, I think, is going to become a primary criteria of the efficacy of our campaigns in the next few years. The other one that we've all talked about for a long time is tying online campaigns to offline conversions. And the example that I'll use here is a decidedly offline product, Quaker Oatmeal, which has existed for over 100 years. Now, they ran a display campaign and a YouTube campaign a few months ago, and what they saw was that as a direct result of that campaign, there was a 9% increase in offline sales. Now, imagine if they didn't have to do that as a one-off case study, but that was just a standard metric that we could all deliver to our advertisers on a campaign-by-campaign basis. The prediction that I'm talking about here is saying that for well over a third of those campaigns, that's in fact going to be the case. The primary metric won't be an impression or a click or a conversion. It will be something on the order of measuring emotional engagement with the consumer or directly tying it to offline sales. And the technology to do that is coming into place. We just need to find a way to be able to do that at scale across all of our systems. You know, I just talked about giving users much more direct control over the advertising that they see. Another thing that I think is important, and I think all of us as consumers would agree, is giving them the information about the types of ads that they would see. With the click of a button, a user should be able to find out what type of data of theirs was used to deliver that ad, who delivered that ad, and give them the controls to be able to change that if they so choose. For example, if a user saw an ad because they live in Boston, it's mid-December, and they've been looking for flights to Miami, then we should tell them that. If a user saw an ad because they're sports enthusiasts and it's 80 degrees outside, we should tell them that. And that should happen on every single ad. You know, the technology is coming into place to be able to do just that. I'm not going to dive into the issues that are sort of swirling around our industry in terms of these types of things, but I'm going to make one point, which is that in all of these conversations, we can't lose sight of the fact that we have to put the users front and center. You know, when I go home, I know, for example, that my wife doesn't want to talk about all the industry jargon or be given, you know, another set of 50 controls to control how her data is being used. She doesn't care about third-party cookies or first-party cookies. What users care about is being told in very clear, precise terms how their data is being used and have very simple controls about how that can be used in the future. And that's what we should all aspire towards. And I think there's going to be a wave of innovation in this area in terms of capabilities, both integrated into advertising and other types of innovation that's going to allow users to do that. And we're going to have to do that as an industry as a whole. You know, I just wanted to pause and really applaud the industry's self-regulatory efforts around things like ad choices, which has a vision to deliver this type of information across all display ads on the internet. I think the momentum behind that is tremendous. I think we need to keep that up. And if we do that, you know, 25 billion ads a day are going to have this type of information associated with them. I think that's a goal that we can all feel proud aspiring towards, and the technology is coming into place to be able to do that. Now, if we do all of these 5 predictions that I talked about, it comes to my favorite prediction, which is that I think that nearly half of all users, if they were ever polled, would say that display advertising is their favorite ad format. As you heard me allude to a little bit earlier, I said today that number is something like 18% of all users say that display ads are useful or very useful. But as I said, if we did all of those things that were embedded in my prediction, that number would increase to something like 2/3, 66%. So it's not that big of a stretch to say that, you know, about half of those users would say that display is their favorite format. And I think that's all an industry that we'd be extremely proud to be a part of. So just to recap, the predictions that I've talked about are online impressions per users would decrease 25%. At the same time, engagement rates on those ads would increase across the board everywhere by 50%. Users will have a direct say, you know, a precise direct say in over 25% of the ads that are being delivered to them, up from, you know, minuscule numbers today. a full third of all campaigns will have a primary metric that's more than just clicks and impressions, whether it's emotional engagement, whether it's online to offline sales. 25 billion ads a day will have direct information about why that ad got delivered to the users. And if we do all of these things, well over 40% of users would say that display advertising is their favorite format. Some of you have heard me talk in the past about how I think we as an industry can get from a $25 billion industry today in a few short years to a $200 billion industry. I'm a big believer in it. I think it's going to happen. It's the reason why we at Google are investing so heavily in display advertising. And these predictions I would submit to you today are going to be mileposts along the way as we achieve that steady growth from the size of the industry today to that overall vision of $200 billion in the course of the next few years. Which leads me to my very last prediction. That prediction is that if I were giving this talk, 4 or 5 years from now, instead of that word cloud that I started this conversation with, I would submit that the Ad Age word cloud would look something like this. And if we're able to pull that off through all of the next wave of technology innovation that's coming, I think we would have achieved something as an industry that's truly monumental and profound. And at Google, we look forward to partnering with all of you to make that happen. Thank you very much.